The reality on the streets of Baghdad suggests Al-Maliki is either ignorant of what is going on, misrepresenting his intentions, or that his capabilities are not yet sufficient to turn his good intentions into action. Stephen Hadley, U.S. National Security Advisor.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. We are discussing the achievements and failures of Al-Maliki's premiership with Salih Al-Mutlak, Haider Al-Ibadi, and Anas Al-Tikriti. Anas, the international community, 90 countries are meeting in Stockholm in Sweden, assessing Iraq's progress, and they're looking whether they should give money and political support to the Iraqi government. The most important thing on the agenda is whether this Iraqi government is capable of fighting corruption. Explain to me and to the viewers, how is it possible that a prime minister would sign an executive order putting any minister or any high official beyond the law, meaning they cannot be touched even for embezzlement or corruption?
I think it's telling of where Iraq has reached, unfortunately, that today even the commission to fight corruption is essentially has been rendered totally toothless and without any kind of power. By this executive order, essentially what Al-Maliki has done is any kind of minister or high-serving official who may be, in a situation where he has to be investigated, cannot anymore. Now that, I think, is quite telling of where we have reached. Now, Iraq is slightly beyond or better than Somalia and Bangladesh or Myanmar in terms of the corruption league in the entire world. That is the Iraq that we're talking about. And unfortunately, I once again disagree entirely with Haider Al-Ibadi in painting that rosy picture of where Iraq is. Let me tell you about what's happening abroad, Mr. Al-Ibadi. I live in Britain, where there are more than 500,000 Iraqi Kurdish refugees throughout Europe. There are around 1 million Kurdish refugees. In a recent report, no more than 2.5% of them have dared venture back to the safe zone and the havens of the northern of Iraq. No one is going back to Iraq. Every Iraqi that, if given the means, would choose to leave Iraq today. Economy is in tatters. Our unemployment rate is higher than anywhere else in the region. That is not a good situation.
Anas Al-Tikriti, let him answer that, and just bear in mind, Haider Al-Ibadi, in your answer, when these millions, if not billions of dollars are absconded out of the country through corruption or through other deals, we don't have the time to get into it. That is money taken away from the poor people, isn't it?
Well, of course, there are criminals in Iraq, and the bigger criminal is the previous regime, who plundered the country into billion.
Forget about the old regime, because we all agree they did a lot of bad things. But for this current regime, our program is about this current regime. How is it possible that not a single person is behind bars?
Well, exactly. I agree that Americans, through their occupation, has done a very bad thing in Iraq. It blundered the wealth of the country.
Now you're blaming the Americans for the corruption.
If you look at the reports, most of the reports, in actual fact, all of them are talking about the blunders under the Americans, under American officials who blunder the wealth of the country and blunder American taxpayers' money.
Haider Al-Ibadi, you are a senior advisor to the Prime Minister. How can you look us into the camera and say no Iraqi official is responsible for the corruption and for stealing the money?
No, don't put words into my mouth. I didn't say that. I said most of the corruption in the international reports are talking about different corruption than what you are talking about at the moment. I agree there are corruptions in Iraq. There has been a corruption culture of corruption in Iraq.
Bars? How come Al-Maliki has never
There are
investigations.
There are many people behind
bars. But there are no people serving time.
No, there are many DGs, many responsible people, some of them deputy ministers are behind bars, if you are not aware about that. Their names has been published, and the order about the Prime Minister, which your guest talked about, that order doesn't make these people not accountable. All it says, when a person who is in a very sensitive position, he must be referred to the Ministerial Council to be investigated before he's placed
that I grant you, there are many investigations, Salih Al-Mutlak, the government has done, and many warrants have been issued, and we know exactly what happened to it. Are you satisfied about the level of fighting corruption in Iraq, Salih Al-Mutlak?
No.
Well, I think I will ask my friend Haider Al-Ibadi to be fair and say that it's a shame on us, a shame on every political leader in Iraq to see that Iraq is being classified in the top list of corruption in Iraq. And I will be surprised when he put the blame on the previous regime. We are living in this regime since 5 years, so we should forget the past, especially when the corruption there now is much higher than the corruption at any time in Iraq. So let's forget about the past and try to correct what we are in now. Iraq is corrupted everywhere. The billions of dollars are outside, and I did not see any of the seniors in this government, you know, behind the bars in Iraq. All what they did is they went to 2 ministers maybe who were served not on this time, on the previous time, and they, you know, put them in jail for some time. But none of these leaders, now we could see that they were being questioned, and in fact, even in the parliament, if we want to investigate on a minister, we are not allowed to bring him in. He will not come, and Mr. Al-Ibadi knows that.
That has become amply clear, Salih Al-Mutlak, all over the world. It has become the laughingstock of the international community. But there is one thing recently happened, Anas Al-Tikriti, and that is, for 2 years, Al-Maliki was labeled sectarian until he started cracking his whip against Al-Sadris in Basra and against the North, Al-Qaeda and others. So in one way or another, he has absolved himself of that charge that he is a pure Shiite and he will not a Shiite. How do you answer that?
Well, he may have, and I'm sure that many people that accuse him of this would have been relieved that he's proven, in a sense, that he may be not as sectarian as people feared. But however, what he did prove, unfortunately, was that he's in the pocket of the Americans, and that is possibly an equally
Wait a minute. Are you saying the 2 campaigns in Basra and Mosul are American-driven and instigated, and not by the will and power of the Prime Minister?
Absolutely. The mission of Al-Maliki over the past year and a half, and I have to admit, despite my opposition to the whole political setup, not to Al-Maliki per se, however, he has had a great challenge on his hand. But I have to say that over the past year, it seems to me and to every other observer that Al-Maliki's main remit to himself seems to be making the Americans look good.
Let Haider Al-Ibadi answer that.
Seems to be something led by Al-Maliki, by the Americans.
Well, I mean, to me, that is laughable, because these people who are in power at the moment, the Americans didn't want these people to be in power. These people have been voted in by the people. The Americans wanted completely different people in government. They supported different class of people to be in government, but through the elections, people brought these people at the moment in government. We didn't take part in any conferences with the Americans before the change of the regime. We have been against the occupation from day one, but the people wanted us in office, and Al-Maliki is a nationalist,
I'm sorry, Mr.
well-known
That's
figure.
Absolutely untrue. That's absolutely untrue. I think that these things are well documented.
I think
that is absolutely untrue. Are you saying that Al-Maliki was against the American occupation? That is absolutely untrue. That is absolutely untrue.
Al-Da'wa is on record as Al-Da'wa is on record that it was against the occupation. It didn't take back any activities.
Haider Al-Ibadi, we all knew that when the drums of war was beating back in September, October, November in 2002, we knew the occupation was coming, we knew the invasion was coming. So it serves a political purpose for senior Iraqi politicians at the time. They're waiting for this invasion to happen, say, we are all against it, we are all against it. If you are against it, you would not participate.
No, I'm talking about the current Prime Minister, I'm talking about Al-Da'wa in particular. I'm not saying all of them they were against.
If that is the case, Haider Al-Ibadi, why is that the government, the Prime Minister right now is in negotiation with the American government in order to have a long-term U.S. presence?
What do you want him to do? To leave the country to the Americans? Now we have 170,000 American soldiers. That's not by our own doing. That's by the doing of the international community, by the lack of any Arab decision.
Are you convinced, Salih Al-Mutlak, what Haider Al-Ibadi just said? What shall we do? Leave it to the Americans?
I mean,
Salih Al-Mutlak?
No, we shouldn't. We have to make sure that the Americans are limited in their maneuvering in Iraq. That's what we should do.
And that you do by giving them long-term presence and bases in Iraq, Salih Al-Mutlak. Is this a good argument?
No, that's a propaganda. That's a propaganda by Al Jazeera. That's not true.
Go ahead, Salih Al-Mutlak.
No. I think this long-term agreement is being on the table. The government is putting it on the Supreme Council in Iraq, and they are discussing it, and I think they are going to support it, and we will wait and see. I don't think there is a conflict between this government and the American, and it was said publicly by the American that they are supporting this government. And even those who elected this government at that time, they are against this government now. Even their allies before, they are not with them now.
You bring a very good point, Saleh Al-Mutlak. Let me get a final answer from Anas Al-Tikriti. The irony of a prime minister before the invasion, he against the invasion, and right now he's engineering a long-term U.S. presence. Go ahead.
Well, it seems that because of the failure of the whole setup, unfortunately now Al-Maliki has only one friend to turn to, and that is the American partner. And that is the worst situation that and that's exactly the kind of situation that the Americans wanted us to be at, where we can't turn to our national friends, to our Iraqi friends, to our brothers and sisters. We have to turn to the Americans in order to build our future. I think that if we want a future for Iraq, this current leadership has to stop blaming others. It has to stop finding excuses, and it has to start laying the blame and the responsibility at its own shoulders, and to admit its own failures. Unless it starts doing that, we have a very, very long future. And I fear, Jassim, we'll be meeting in another 5 years, talking about how 10 years of Iraq have been lost from a whole generation of Iraqis who've been yearning for a good future.
Anas Al-Tikriti, Haidar Al-Ibadi, Saleh Al-Mutlak. Gentlemen, thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq. To access the show and to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. That's all the time we have for this week. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. I'll see you then. Goodbye.